2, 1. Hey, everybody, this is Dean with the Two Party Podcast, and I am on here, and I'm going to mess your name up, but I'm going to try it. Anais, I messed it up already. Anais Lucia.
Yes, you got Lucia right.
50%. So again, she's joining us today. Now, she is an actor, getting into directing, comedian, podcast host. She hosts, she's killing it because she's killing me with 3 podcast shows that she hosts, which for those of us in the podcast world know, it is a juggle just doing one. So she's got her hands full with 3 shows, but I'm going to hand it over to her. I want her to kind of tell the audience and tell you guys about who she is, where she's from, a little bit about her background, and what got her into acting and got her to where she is today. Go ahead.
Oh, hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, Dean, for having me on. So, yes, I do a lot of things. I was telling Dean earlier that I do everything that would disappoint my parents. So my parents are definitely disappointed. I'm the first
Job well done.
Yeah, I did it. So originally I'm from a really small town in Arizona. Don't really want to name it just for privacy, but yeah, I'm from a small town, but I've lived, small towns are pretty boring. So as soon as I could move away, I did. And I've lived in San Diego, LA, Orlando. Right now I'm in another city in Florida. So
nice. I'm actually from Florida. So that's what I call home. I'm actually in Tulsa, Oklahoma now. Don't ask why. But Florida's my home. That's what it's always been.
Yeah. I just came from LA. I was in LA. I moved from LA in September of 2019, so just before COVID. But I mean, not that Florida's really that much better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I just went from a place that's really got COVID to a place that's really got COVID bad.
But they're handling it differently. Like they both have COVID really bad, but California's being really strict, and Florida's like, who cares? So.
Yeah, they're like, you're gonna catch it at some point.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I just went from one coast to the other, but I've wanted to act since I was like super young, since I was like 4. I remember just watching movies and just thinking like, I want to do that. Like that's all I could think of.
When did you start?
That looks like fun.
At what age did you get into acting?
I mean, in elementary school, doing all the plays, I always got picked for roles because our teachers would like assign roles, and they would always pick me. And then I started making my own movies and stuff when I was in middle school, when I got my dad's camera, because I'm from a small town, so there's no entertainment.
That you had to create the entertainment, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. I was like, okay, so I want to be an actress, but like there's no work here, so I'm just gonna give myself the work. So I just would make my own projects and things like that.
I'm bringing Hollywood to Arizona.
Yeah, I'd get my cousins, my siblings to be in my movies, my plays. So I started and then that's kind of when I discovered, I also really liked directing. I like telling people what to do.
Right.
So then I got into that, and then I went to film school, and I focus more on directing and editing in film school. I kind of put acting on the back burner just because, like, I don't know, I love both, but sometimes I feel like I'm in the mood where I'm like, okay, sometimes I just want to act, sometimes I just want to direct, sometimes I want to do both. So in college, I was like, let me focus more on like directing and editing, and I did a few documentaries, and then I moved to LA after that. And that's when I was like, okay, I really want to get more into acting. So I started just kind of getting some more, roles in like short films and things like that. And I really love it. I just did my first, over a year ago, I finished my first feature film. It's been showing at a lot of film festivals. It's actually won some awards. I won Best Supporting Actress for it, so that's pretty cool. It's called The Family Tree, directed by Jorge Amir. You can watch it on Amazon Prime.
Very cool. Yeah, I was just looking at that. I was actually just looking at that before we came on.
Just a warning, if anyone looks it up, it's a kind of provocative film. So if you're more like conservative, like you're not going to enjoy it. So
right.
Just a warning. Yeah.
Putting that label out there right now. That's very cool. Well,
and go ahead. I have so much stuff, but yeah, the podcast and comedy kind of came during COVID,
Right.
because those are things that I kind of had in the back of my mind. I always wanted to try. I actually have dated stand-up comedians before, and I would always like go to their shows, be like the very
Right.
supportive girlfriend. And I had jokes written in like my phone. I'm like, oh, in case I ever try stand-up, I have jokes. And then since the pandemic hit, I was like, well, I have time now. So I
Yeah.
started kind of developing comedy. I took some classes. I've performed some Zoom shows and also live here in Florida, because places are open here. So I've actually been able
Exactly.
to do shows in person. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, 3 podcasts. So
That's
lots.
insane. It's insane. At the end of the day, it's really cool to be able to have, and I've had quite a few podcast hosts on, but it's really cool to get them on here with different, basically just different variety and genre of podcasts. Let's dive right into the first one that I've got listed right here, which is the How to Relationship podcast. Let's discuss that one a little bit. Kind of what was your vision for that, and what you guys mainly do on that platform.
Okay, so my idea for that was, I mean, I know there's a lot of relationship podcasts. I know, trust me.
Right.
So
So
it's like,
some good,
why?
some bad, some horrible advice, either one.
Well, okay, so part of it was kind of therapeutic in a way, where because I did not come from a good like background in terms of like relationships. Like my parents are divorced. My whole family is like divorce central. Like everyone's divorced in my family. So it's like I didn't have good role models in
Right.
terms of being in a relationship. But then as I've gotten old, and I used to like be like, I never want to get married, just very cynical and stuff like that. But then as I've gotten older, I've met really good guys that I've dated.
Mm-hmm.
I've met great couples that they've been together for so long, and they're it's just healthy and loving. And
Yeah.
since I was I was really inspired by them. And every time I meet a couple who's been together for a long time, I'm always really curious, like, how did you guys get together? What
Yeah.
attracted you to each other? And since I have
How do
these
you not kill each
conversations,
other? That's one
yeah,
of the big ones that comes
exactly.
up.
And so I love having these conversations with them. So I thought, why not have them like on a podcast and share this information with other people, like whether men or women, women who might feel like there's no hope, or men who maybe like they don't have good role models in
Right.
their life in terms of like maybe male role models, and maybe how to like they don't really know the proper way to like
Yeah.
treat a woman with respect. So
Yeah.
maybe if they
I
can get
think
something
that's
out of
a
it.
huge dynamic in our world today. It's been for years. I mean, honestly, I'll be 45 next month. I'm an old man. So to be honest, like the dating scene when I was growing up was like when the rave scene was huge and stuff like that. And so you met a girl in a club, and most of the time you guys were all out of your mind and nobody could even talk, and whatever, eyes in the back of your head, just listening to music. But it was like, even outside of that dynamic, the dating has always been kind of a weird thing for, depends on your personality, depends on your background.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been, very confident, able to walk up to just about anybody. All my friends are kind of like, dude, are you really going over there? Yeah, I'm going over there. And then there's a lot of guys that just don't have that confidence of like, they see a beautiful woman and immediately it's like self-confidence goes to the ground. And I know it goes both ways. I mean, it's on both sides for the woman as well. And
Yeah.
the hardest part, I think, in the dating is just you really don't know. It's always for a lot of people, it's just that the unknown is the scary part. For me, it was always, that was the fun part. For me, it was like, I get to learn to get to know somebody that person could be from any background. And to me, it was always cool to be like, to go talk to a girl or whatever, about just learning who the heck she is, where she came from. Like, I've never seen you here before. What's going on with you? And that, to me, that was the cool thing when I was back single guy doing my thing. But for a lot of people, it's like, that's, how can you do that? Like, what? That's scary to not, you could walk up there and she could be a CEO of a company. It's like, who cares? She's a CEO of a company. She's a human being. Who cares?
Yeah. Well,
But
that's I think that's a healthy way to look at it. Whereas I feel, I don't know, just some I was actually gonna start a series on my TikTok about my experiences with guys who can't handle no.
right.
Because I have stories about guys
Yeah.
who couldn't handle being rejected
Yeah.
in a nice way. So um I feel like the way you look at it, where it's like, okay, you're just trying to get to know another human
That's
being,
it.
like that's a healthy way. Whereas
Yeah.
I
And,
feel like some guys are just like, they see kind of, I don't know, they put the girl on a pedestal, and it's like, if she rejects me, my life is over. It's like, oh my
right.
God, so much pressure.
And I think it's important too. I mean, you know, you're discussing healthy relationships, and a healthy relationship doesn't necessarily mean a romantic relationship. A healthy relationship means a friendship. A healthy relationship means, you know, just getting to know somebody. And so for me, that's what it's always been about. I'm not always, you know, back then it wasn't about dating and getting the girl in bed. It was always about getting to know who she was. Were we compatible? And if not, it was pivot and turn and go find someone else to talk to. If I was looking for that night, obviously that would be what it is. You know, just speaking from a single douchebag kind of guy mentality. But I mean, at the end of the day, for me, you know, like you said, I mean, I've kind of learned a lot coming along to the age where I'm at now. But the healthy relationship side of it is not, like you said, not putting them on a pedestal, but at the same time, just realizing you're just trying to open up a door for a friendship. It all starts with opening the door of communication. And if you walk into something expecting a romantic relationship happening overnight, or, you know, the first time you see someone, all of a sudden you fall in love and there's just everything's going on, bells, whistles, and Disney. It's just not going to happen, you know. I mean, and it happens rarely, but it doesn't, you know. It's just one of those things, your expectations sometimes, and then you get hit, like you said, with a no, and it's like, you know. But if you're expecting this big crazy Disney princess craziness, it's just not reality, you know. And I've always been based in like, it's a reality, you know. You're going to walk up to this girl, you're going to ask her a question, or you're going to whatever, introduce yourself, and then you're going to open a dialogue, or she's just going to be like, yo, douchebag, get away from me, and then you just walk away, you know. And it's cool, but it's all how you handle it, and it's all how you kind of look at it and perceive it, I think.
I feel like, I don't know if I hate dating apps, but
right.
I don't know if dating apps have something to do with it, where it's like they need this like instant gratification or something. And I mean, I've seen both men and women do this. They like, you know, if the other person doesn't like them or is in love with them right away, it's like, oh my gosh. And it's like, okay, I need to get to know you.
Yeah, like,
you know, I'm
like,
not
it's
gonna...
cool, we're on the app together, but that's not enough.
Yeah, so
I don't understand dating apps at all. And I think maybe one time in my life, and I want to say it was probably maybe 10 years ago or so, I jumped on, someone was like, hey, you got to check these dating apps out, they're funny, you got to look at, you know, you can look at all these different girls. And I was like, okay, I'll download the dang thing. And I looked and I set up an account, and I was like, this is horrible. Like, this is how you guys meet people? Like, really? And you're just gonna go pick a stranger off an app, and you're gonna go meet them, and that's your date? Like, that's how you're okay? I never understood it. I was like, no, it's not organic. It's not, to me, I don't know. We're humans. We're supposed to meet. We're supposed to have companionship. The emotions are supposed to feed each other, good and bad. You know, you can't get emotions and you can't get an expression from somebody off of an app.
Yeah, and people, I don't know, I'm more of a, even though I am more introverted, I'm just more of an in-person type of, like, that's how I want to get to know people. I want to talk to them, like, because anyone can take a while to like write the best text ever, and they can seem a certain way through text, but then you meet them and they can't even hold a conversation or something.
I knew a guy, this is no joke, I knew a guy, we used to make, his name, I don't want to give his full name, but Bill, it was his name, and the guy was just a player, and you'd see this guy every day of the week, had, you know, a different girl every day of the week. He was just that good and suave with his words, you know, and he could just almost talk any girl into whatever. And, you know, he's a good looking guy and whatever, but when he's one of the ones that was on the dating app at that time. And I remember him just being like, man, I paid so-and-so to write this bio. Like, he paid somebody, one of the girls he was seeing or something, and he paid her to write this awesome bio, and it worked. And he was like, dude, yeah, it only cost me this, and I got this bio, and he's like, dude, everyone reaches out, they love it. And I'm like, dude, you are a nutbag. Like, it's not even you. Like, you're not even the guy on the app. Some girl wrote that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's bad. And so I was like, you know, I don't even know if that account that I did exists even. Like, I have no clue. But it's like, I never really used it. I never was like, I didn't see a need for it. It's like, I'm more of, like you said, you know, I'm kind of introvert, but as you can tell, I am extrovert. You know, I go through moments where I can talk and I can go walk up to people, strangers. I'm very extrovert in the real world, but then when I'm home or I want to relax, I'm completely introvert. I don't want anyone around me. I want to be left alone. So I'm kind of like a happy medium of both.
Oh, so maybe you're more like have you heard ambivert, that term?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's I've had a few people tell me that. They're like, yeah, you're more like an ambivert. And And yeah, it's just, I think I'm probably like maybe 60-40, that's kind of where I'm at. So, but I just don't understand dating apps. I don't think I ever will, because well, now I'm happily married, and so I know I'm not ever going to.
Oh, you're lucky. You are so lucky.
Well, they say
That
lucky, and then some days you're like, I'm lucky because I'm married, and then some days you're like, and then my wife's like, I want to kill you and bury you out back. So you just never know.
I don't know. I think I'd rather have that than deal with dating apps. Not that I'm on them right now, but it's just like, I don't have the other option of having someone. It's just like, and then with the pandemic, it's like you don't really have the option of really going out and meet people. And
yeah,
I'm really into like this area of the face, the mouth, and so the mask like completely ruins that. Now it's like, now I can't see if they have a nice smile, if they're smiling at me, if they have nice teeth. I need to see that. Now I can't.
They're gonna pull the mask down and just be like 2 teeth hanging. It's like you just never know. And you're in Florida, so that's very possible. I mean, that's my home, and I know a lot of crazy people down there. So it's like you never know. They can pull that mask down and have 1 tooth dangling.
The good thing is that it does emphasize the eyes. I've had people that like have known me for years, and they're like, I didn't know you had green eyes. I was like, okay. With the mask, now they realize.
Yeah. I find myself in these awkward moments where like kind of the same. I think it is the mask kind of emphasizes things. I'll be out roundabout wherever I am shopping or whatever, and I find myself like the cashier or something, some girl, and she'll just have really pretty eyes, and I find myself like looking like some weirdo because I'm like staring at her eyes, and I'm like, well, there's nowhere else to stare, and I probably look like a weirdo, but it's like it does emphasize like you're looking at people's eyes more. Whereas before, like a lot of people don't look each other in the eye anymore. I mean, that's just been before the pandemic. You should always should.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things. My dad. I came from a very dysfunctional background, just a little short, and so. Like you were saying about divorce and stuff, that was a very common thing in my family. There was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of, we were kidnapped as kids. There was shootouts. There was it was really crazy in our childhood. But my dad, being the crazy psycho that he was, he always told us as kids, like, you don't look someone in the eye unless you want to hurt them. And that was kind of like my dad's thing was like, when you want to fight or you want to get, he kind of likened it to like when 2 dogs, you put 2 dogs together to fight.
Okay, yeah.
And when dogs look each other in the eye, it gets them angry and they fight. And he's like, that's the only time you look somebody in the eyes when you want to fight. And we were always like, growing up, I was like, that just sounds so stupid. Like, how are you going to talk to somebody with your head turned? Like if you don't want to fight them, and luckily, like through counseling and my mom being a good mother and getting us into counseling, like I learned those were just his crazy narcissistic things.
Wow.
But it was like for a longest time though, growing up, I didn't. I was very shy to look people in the eye. If I did, I would get angry because that was just kind of what thought I was supposed to do. But now I, going through counseling, going through a lot of the healthier things and coping mechanisms that I've learned over the years, though, is like you said, you have to look people in the eye. You have to have intentional meaning in your conversations and communications. Dialogue has to be something where you're looking people in the eye. If it has meaning, it's very easy to be like, kind of, you want to dismiss somebody and just not really pay attention. But that's also, just a body language sign that, somebody doesn't really care about what you're saying.
Yeah. I feel like communication, body language, I feel like that should be a required class.
It should be.
Maybe like middle school, not high school. I feel it's too late. Like we should do it in middle school. Like elementary, they might not get it, but middle school, I think is a good age because I feel like, especially with the internet, people just being online, and I feel like people lack. I mean, it's not like I'm perfect with my social skills. I can still be awkward. I've had a lot of work to do. I used to be like a mute when I was a kid. So I've had to do my own work, but I feel like with all this technology, people really lack a lot of social skills and awareness and body language cues, things like that.
And middle school would be the time, and that's the time where things start kids start misreading each other. Teenagers, that's about the age where they just kind of like, well, he doesn't like me, and or so and so picks on me when she's around so and so, and it's really just a matter of like open communication, explaining like, no, it's okay to have more friends and this and that and the other. Just so that would be a great opportunity to express and teach kids like, this is some body language and emotional body language that you need to know to communicate better. I would agree.
Let's make it happen.
Right, exactly. We gotta get this amazing. Start doing some courses, set up a website, because you need one more thing to do, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm just like an entrepreneur, but without the money. So
Right.
that's when I'll know I'll have made it when I'm actually making some money.
We got to start working on getting investors in here quickly on this.
Yes.
Let's talk about Musecast. So what got that going and what started that?
So I love Muse. That's my favorite band.
Yep.
They're a UK rock trio, in case for those who don't know who they are.
Yeah. I listen
And
to them, I know, but there's probably some people in the audience that don't.
yeah, they might know just like one song.
Yeah.
I know every song. but yeah, I love them. And so when I was trying to think of like the podcast I want to do, I was like, what can I talk about for a long time? And Muse is definitely something I could talk about. Every time I would meet a Muse fan, I could just talk to them. Like we would just talk for hours about Muse. And I was like, why not have this on a podcast? Like if I can talk about them for a long time. And I did my research and I looked, whereas like, okay, with the relationship podcast, there's already a lot, but there was no podcast about Muse. So I was like, niche. Yeah. So,
Yep.
it's good to have a niche podcast. And so I started it. And out of all my podcasts, that's my most successful one, the niche one.
I was going to ask that too. That's cool.
Yeah. And I've had a lot of Muse fans tell me like, I'm so glad you started this. I love your podcast. I listen to every episode. That's so cool that, I've never, like, no one has ever done this before. And I was like, yay. So, that's, super niche, but, it's my most successful one.
Do you stream music? What do you do for episodes on that? Do you stream music, talk about shows, or just invite fans on?
So on every episode I feature a Muse fan cover because I want to, there's so many talented fans there, and so I kind of want to, it's a way to like play Muse's songs without like the actual tracks.
Right. Yeah, because
of
the copyright nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just a good way to network and get to know them. If they don't know about the podcast, when I reach out to them, then they'll be aware of the podcast because I feature them, because I always ask for permission. And sometimes we'll do like for season 1 we did like our top 10 favorite Muse performances with me and my other friend who's a big Muse fan. Then Muse released a concert film called Simulation Theory, so we did one talking about the film.
Cool.
We've done a few just like album retrospectives, just geek out on every track on the album. So if you're into Muse, you would really enjoy. I did one because so Muse has been together for over 20 years. Yeah. So one of my first episodes was about how they've been able to stay together for so long, because that's a mystery to me. I think because I come from a family of divorce.
Don't. Yeah, a lot of bands don't. They break up.
So it was over an hour long where I was like, just kind of showing the clips and examples of like why I think maybe they've been able to stay together for so long and still like each other. So yeah, cool. And I have some pretty cool episodes planned for this season. I have one. We're going to talk about our favorite songs from their least liked albums. So because because there are some albums that aren't exactly the favorites from fans, so I kind of wanted to make it a little tougher. Like instead of geeking out on the ones that everyone loves, let's talk about the ones that people don't like.
That makes sense. I mean, because every band, no matter, I can think of any band in history, even a band has been around forever, like Rolling Stones. I mean, they have albums that suck, but there's 3 or 4 songs that are like awesome on those albums specifically, and you're like, that's the best they did on that album. So then to touch on that is every band, somebody has their favorite. Who's your favorite?
My favorite member? Oh my God. Okay, I think I'm gonna, it's hard. It's so hard. Shoot. I think I'm gonna have to go with, it's a tie kind of. Shoot.
Yeah,
okay.
Most people are like the lead singer, and then some are like the drummer or the guitarist.
Yeah, I think, oh my gosh. Okay. So it might change if you ask me later, but right now I'm going to say the drummer just because he inspired me to start playing drums.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, I wanted to learn since I was a kid, but I was really shy and intimidated. So I thought like girls can't play because I would only see the guys playing percussion. Yeah. So I played the clarinet in band, even though I secretly wanted to do percussion.
Take the clarinet over there and start hitting the drums.
Yeah, and I always had this desire to learn drums, and then I I found out about Muse. I saw them live, and I usually, when I go to concerts, I always look at the drummer for some reason. It's just, I'm always captivated by the drummer, and I'm like, I want to do that. And Meg White is another drummer I really love, and her and Dominic Howard, the drummer from Muse, were both the ones that kind of like, okay, I want to start learning to play drums, and I started taking drum lessons, and I got my own drum set and everything.
Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah.
That is, my family on my mom's side is all about music. So my grandfather's, he's in the Hall of Fame for steel guitar. Like, there's music's been in, he's wrote multiple albums and songs and played with a lot of good old bands and stuff. And so music's always been in our family. It's always like, if it's not somebody playing music, it's somebody singing. Always been in our family that way. And obviously I suck at that thing right there hanging up. I try, I make some noise. I sound like a cat, two cats kind of in a cardboard box fighting, but I try, but when I was younger, I started playing, my mom was dating a guy, who owned the rock shop in Portland, Oregon. And he leased equipment to a lot of the bands. And this was, again, this shows my age, that Nirvana was big. Soundgarden was big. And who was the other ones? Temple of a Dog. Pearl Jam and Temple of a Dog was just forming that band. All those guys would come through Washington and Portland, and they would play at his shop. He would literally close the doors and they would come through. And several times it was just a good memory that I was just thinking of is several times when we were at the shop and I was there, because my mom worked like 3 jobs. She was very busy. And she was going to college at the same time. And so a lot of times, like, this guy would just take me in, and he was teaching me guitar when I was young. He was teaching me keyboard. And then I'd go in there and play around on the drums and stuff. But I always got lucky enough to be in there when they'd shut down and do a jam session. And it would be, Pearl Jam or Soundgarden would come through to Washington or through Oregon to play a show. And that's where they would, back then. Nowadays, most of these guys, they carry their own equipment and everything follows them on their tour. Back then, they would show up in a city and they had a place where they would lease the equipment. And his shop was the shop. So everybody knew the rock shop. And they would come to this place and they'd do a jam session on the equipment they wanted to use that night. And then he would have it all shipped over to wherever stadium, whatever they were playing. And that's how they would do. But I was lucky enough to be in there with Chris Cornell. I was lucky enough to be in there with Eddie Vedder a couple times. And they'd have jam sessions, and I'd just be sitting back. I didn't know who they were then. I was just some young, I knew their music from the radio and stuff, but it wasn't like, I didn't think they were famous people. Kurt Cobain had come through there several times and played. Dave Grohl. I mean, a lot of those guys had played in there. And I was young. I didn't really know. To me, I was just trying to learn guitar myself, and I was watching these guys jam. And he's like, "These guys are really good. You got to watch them." And little did I know now, looking back, that these guys were just, famous, great guys.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But I remember trying to play drums, and I told my mom, I was like, "I'm tired of guitar. I want to play drums." And she's like, she told her boyfriend, "He is not bringing a drum set to my house. There's no way I'm going to listen to a kid beat on drums at my house." She's like, "If you want to teach him, you teach him in the shop." So he set up a little area in the corner of his shop that was like a little practice set for me. And every time I was up there, I'd just be beating on these drums. So he taught me all the paradiddles, how to get all the stuff going in the cymbals. And I got really good at just a basic beat. And I never really progressed much further than that. And now I probably just sound like, I think the most I could do is probably like a hip hop beat or something. And I've got a friend around the corner that he plays, and he's really good, like really good. But it's just funny when I think back, like, music's always been in our family, but drums was something I always wanted to play, and I was never allowed to. My mom was like, "There is no way you're bringing a drum set in our house. There is no way." Because I'd be in my room just screaming on guitar or have the keyboard, or I'd turn everything up. So even when she was home, she would just die. And then if I added drums to that, she'd be like, "That's it. The one-man band's got to go."
Yeah, I feel like I kind of feel bad for any of my former neighbors. Right now it's okay, but like I like tap dancing and I like playing drums. I'm probably one of the most annoying neighbors. Like, dang, she's like tap dancing, I'm playing drums.
Do you live in the upstairs apartment to make it even better?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, sorry about that, neighbor downstairs.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Let's talk about quarantined happy hour. And I can kind of guess where that's going, but tell us a little bit about that and where that started.
So that one I started obviously was during the pandemic. Yep. That's kind of my podcast to kind of like let out some steam. So on that one, I usually have a drink.
Yeah.
while I do the episode. I don't get drunk or anything, but like I said, it's kind of more let out steam, relax. Kind of,
Hmm.
I wanted it to have a vibe where it's like I'm at a bar talking to a friend or something. So it's
Right.
not like super formal or anything. It's like, let's have a drink and talk. But we talk, there's different topics on each episode, and I have a different guest on each episode. So it's kind of like, what do I feel like talking about this week? Because yeah, it's good to have some podcasts that are more like niche and just
Hmm.
about a certain topic. And that's what my other podcasts are for. But this one's more like random stuff, whatever I randomly want to talk about. That's
Right.
kind of what that podcast is for.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, and it's, I started this, let's see, we started Two Party Podcast. We went live with Two Party in September. I want to say first week of September last year. And within the first like
Mm,
2 weeks, we literally were hitting like 30,000 numbers around the world. Things just
wow.
like spiked really big. And again, we were talking before the show. I mean, I was just doing content, and I was pumping it
Mm,
out, posting it everywhere I could post it, having every one of my friends share. And it was just like, it went from like literally just me, same as you, like kind of in the middle of the pandemic, bored, like I want
mm-hmm,
to bring something to the world that's not me just sitting in my house. And so let me
mm-hmm,
just go into the studio, which I already had the studio set up because I like to make music. So I kind of was
mm-hmm.
like, let me just use the studio for what it's meant to be and just start producing some stuff. And that's
Nice.
that's kind of how Two Party Podcast came about. And then next
Oh.
thing I know, everybody's like calling and messaging and like, dude, you're famous. Like I got a friend in Australia that's heard of your show. And I'm like, well, that's
Ah.
kind of interesting. And then I started getting these emails from India and from where was the other one from? A lot of Sweden. I get a lot of Swedish from Stockholm and stuff that are like, hey, and we get these emails in, and I'm like, dude, what's going on here? Is this did I hit something? Did I somehow I marketed something that
Wow.
worked? And then the next thing I know, I started getting nonstop guests, and I started getting PR firms calling me, going, hey, we've got a lineup of people we'd like to have on your show immediately.
Oh,
And I'm like, well,
wow.
that's fun. And then I lucked out, and then it became like we started getting a lot of sponsors, and then we started getting
Mm.
um, not just the sponsorships, but then we just started getting these partnerships going with other companies and stuff. And it was like, wow. And I mean, by that time it was like December, and I'm like, wow, what did we do here? It's like it kind of went really fast, and it was kind of a flash went by. And then here we are going into the new year, and we're really doing good, and we're reaching out to other podcast hosts like you. We talk a lot, and I noticed this was one of the things I was researching and kind of looking at. One of the topics that you don't mind talking about is we talk a lot on the show about mental health. We talk a
Mm-hmm.
lot about, and obviously with your show, Quarantine Happy Hour, it just goes with the pandemic theme. We've more than before. We're talking mental health because there's so many people
Yeah.
struggling. Last year alone, 9 people died. 3 of them from suicide. Good friends of mine. Just
Oh,
last year, one of my
wow.
neighbors directly across the street, good friend of mine, shot himself.
What? Oh my
And
gosh.
I walked in with his son was there. He couldn't go in. I walked in to find him.
Oh,
It was pretty sad. And I just saw him the day before. I mean, this was a good friend of mine. I'd go sit in the driveway and talk with. And
gosh.
the pandemic's just been a nightmare in different ways for for everyone. Everybody's, well, I have family members that died of COVID. I have
Mm.
family members that lost their job. I have this, I have that. Well, there's people that I've walked into that literally blew their brains out. There's people that took their own life with pills. They just literally overdosed and died because they just weren't sure what the future held, or didn't want to know. At the end of the day, and unfortunately, it's a very sad situation. But it puts us into where I try to use this platform a lot to talk about that and to talk about mental health. And most importantly, I use the platform for lifting people up, encouraging them, helping them succeed, talking about how we can help others in our daily walk. One of the things I try to do, I challenge everybody daily, is to help make it a minimum to help one person a day. Period. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be the same person every day, but I always challenge everybody to be a stranger. I can go help my
Mm-hmm.
kid every day. I can help my wife every day, but I try to make it outside of our world, and that way
Mm-hmm.
it's in our community. So I encourage
Mm-hmm.
everybody, one person a day. You can look back in a year and you help 365 people in your local community.
Wow.
And that, a lot of that, it doesn't have to be financial. It can be holding a door, giving a compliment, smiling at somebody. Somebody could have just came from their house who was in a domestic abuse situation, got their butt beat, and is at the store trying to buy a pack of cigarettes to not think about it. And just you holding a door and giving a compliment removes them from that abuse for a minute.
Mm.
Things like that. Buying people, I always buy the car behind me in a drive-through. I always buy their meal when I drive off, and that way their meal's paid for, they pull up. Things like that, just little acts of kindness we can do each day. And I challenge everybody, just one person, to make it a minimum one person a day. If you help 10 people a day, obviously that's awesome. But I'd always try to choose one. And so we talk a lot about mental health. Maybe there's something you could share with the audience that maybe you were going through a hard time, even if it was through the pandemic, where you could kind of share what you used to cope and get through it.
Okay, so there's a lot. Well, I that's one thing I want to do with like my stand-up comedy and just in general, because in my stand-up comedy I do talk about mental health, and I want to kind of help make it kind of get rid of the stigma of just being able to talk about it. I feel like a lot of it, I go to therapy. I encourage others to go to therapy.
I do too.
And that they shouldn't be embarrassed. I feel like going to seeing your therapist should be just as normal as seeing your doctor, and
it really should be.
And that's one of the things that bothers me is like, you can say, oh, I went to the doctor for a checkup, and people are like, okay, that's fine. But if you say I saw my therapist today, they're like, oh my God, like I can't be around you. I can't have you working for me. You must not.
Yeah, you're gonna snap at any minute.
Exactly. And I don't like that. So I've dealt with depression for a really long time. Almost like I'm 35. So for like more than half of my life. So it's definitely a struggle. Sometimes I have, better years than others, sometimes really bad months. It just, it's a struggle. Definitely like a day-to-day thing, anxiety, some other stuff. But I go to, I'm going to see a therapist. So I recommend that. And I definitely recommend kind of what you're talking about doing nice things for other people. I found that has helped me too. Before the pandemic, I used to volunteer a lot in different organizations and stuff. And it's nice because, when you have a lot of these mental health issues, especially like anxiety, like you're like overthinking a lot, kind of thinking about your own problems. But when you're helping other people, when you're volunteering, you're thinking about them. And they kind of that way you're not thinking about your problems so much, and then maybe kind of helps you kind of put things into perspective, like, okay, maybe just feel a little bit less bad, like, okay, at least I can afford food or something like that.
Helps you get outside of yourself and realize that sometimes some of the things you're stressing or anxious about really aren't worth worrying about as bad.
And during the pandemic, like, just naturally, I've just always been kind of, it sounds kind of like I'm showing off, but like I am just like a giving person. I like to help as much as I can. Sometimes too much, where like I have to learn to like set boundaries.
That's my problem. I will help until it hurts me. And and there's people I know in the past that I've helped, and they were aware of that, and they would try to take advantage. And it's one of those where, I recognize a healthy, line to draw in the sand and say, okay, I've done this for you. It's time for you to lift your pants up and take action.
Exactly. That's something I've had to learn too, is like set boundaries and kind of have more of a balance where, I still want to help, but like also take care of myself as well, because it is true that if you are better taken care of, if you are happier, you're able to better help other people. Whereas, if you're just wearing yourself too thin, then you can't really be as helpful as you can. My therapist is actually prescribed, he's like, I want you to take self-care days. So he has to tell me to do it. So it's and I don't like when people make others feel guilty for it. So I try to tell people, don't, the ones who do feel guilty, like, oh, I won't, just like, I'm like, don't feel guilty. You need to take care of yourself. Okay. It doesn't make you a bad person to take care of yourself. So especially, I don't know, just the most giving people I know, like they rarely, do things for themselves. So I try to encourage them, like, please, it's okay to do things for yourself.
And I agree with you 100% that, I encourage a lot, and I talk a lot on the show, even when we go live on different platforms. We talk a lot about therapy and counseling, and I've been in counseling due to my dysfunctional past since I was 5. And so I can probably, and I haven't been in a few years, because I kind of reached a point where I was like, I have a lot of good coping mechanisms. I'm starting to act and react better in life. And so I, since I moved to Tulsa, I'm like, I don't really need a counselor here. If I do, I can go call my doctor, get a referral, and go get one. But it's one of those things over the years, like, 20 plus years I've been doing counseling, and I've had some really, I've changed counselors along the way over the years, and I've had some really great counselors. I've had some horrible counselors, to be
Oh
honest.
yeah, me too. I've
You
had some
find a
really
few
bad
that are
ones
just
too. Yeah.
nightmares. You're like, wait, who
Mhm.
needs to be on which side of the couch here?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
That's
but it's important. It's
yeah.
important because we don't realize in our daily life, being human beings, being busy, being entrepreneurs, we don't realize what we do. I mean, we do. We're conscious to a level, but we don't really see ourselves from a different perspective. And sometimes that's what we need. We need to go speak to somebody about the way we think, and so they can give us a reflection on, is that healthy? Is that not healthy? If
Mm-hmm.
it's not healthy, they can give us avenues of how to make better choices when situations come up that aren't healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I definitely recommend it, because it's good. It is good to get someone's objective perspective, because you can go with your
Hmm.
friends, and but like your friends are not your therapist. I try to
My
tell people,
friends are
don't
my
try to
enablers.
yeah. And sometimes they won't, they just, and also they're just not professionals. That's not
Yeah.
what they're
Hmm.
so it is good to go to, because my therapist, I've realized things that I'm like, wow, I never knew that. And I'm so thankful that they made me realize that, because you can't work on things and you can't improve if you don't even know what you need to work on. So it's
Hmm.
good to have the other person kind of, let you know.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's one of those things, like, you don't want to categorize. You always, everybody has kind of that one friend they can go talk to, but they're, again, like you said, they're not a professional. And
Hmm.
you don't ever want to start lumping your relationships into, like, well, this is the person I go to for counseling, and
Yeah.
this is the friend I have that I drink with, this is the friend that I do this with. And you kind of want your relationships to be healthy, in a boundary, set up boundaries, but you want it to also be healthy to where those friends are your friends no matter what. Doesn't matter if they're
Yeah.
if it's your drinking friend, it doesn't always have to be your drinking friend, and you should be able to talk to that friend too. And so there's just building the healthy relationships is so
And
important.
it can be overwhelming, because I've been treated, because I am a good listener. I've been treated as kind of like the the listening friend who gets everything
Yep,
dumped on them. And it does kind of, especially when you get that from a lot of people, it gets a little
it
overwhelming,
does.
because it's like, I can't fix all your problems. And
Hmm.
when they rely on you too much, people need to, especially, I mean, you're an adult, like, you kind of
Right.
need to start taking responsibility, and you can't really just expect me to have all the answers. I'm just a human. I'm just your friend. I'm not,
Yeah.
like, I don't know how I'm supposed to like help fix all your problems. So that's kind of, when it gets a little, when they start kind of relying on you too much to, like, okay, now I'm telling you this, so what do I need to do? It's like, I'm just a
Yeah.
human like you. I don't know
Right.
everything. So
Do you want to
yeah.
make my mistakes, or do you want to make your own? How's that?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I really started reflecting on my life, and really started, growing up, like I said, it was crazy dysfunction for me. But my adult, from 20, well, really from like 18s through 36ish, even, I was still just as crazy as I was when I was young. I was always that guy. I was the adrenaline junkie. I was always that guy that if you told me it couldn't be done, I would show you
Mm.
how it could be done in the best, craziest fashion it could be done in. And that was me.
Wow.
That was who I was. I've always been an adrenaline junkie. I raced cars. I raced motorcycles. I boxed. I've owned businesses since I was 16. I've done so many things in my life. But it was always like, my social aspect of it was, I was that guy. Everybody knew. All my friends knew. I was the one. If you asked me to do it, I'd show you how to do it. And it would be the craziest thing you ever saw in your life when I got done doing it. It's just, that's just who I was. It was kind of just who I wanted to be. And I started about 7 years ago. I want to say about 7 years ago, I started a personal journey of my own to change those things about myself I didn't like, to really look at my
Mm.
character defects, to really look in the mirror. Because I think one of the hardest things we find as adults, or as we get later in life, I say later in life as I'm fixing to turn 45, like I'm 90. But we look in the mirror and we're like, some people can look in the mirror, some people can't. And some people can look in the mirror and actually own their shit, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
term. We can literally look in the mirror and say, this, and this, I do not like about myself. It's not that I don't love it, it's that it's not healthy for me. But yet I
Mm.
still do it, and I still carry it. And so I reached a point about 7 years ago where I said, I'm not happy with who I am. I'm not happy with the person I see in the mirror. I love the person in the mirror, but I don't love the things the person in the mirror does to
Mm-hmm.
himself and to other people around him. And so I really, and I'll be honest, back in the day, I was quite an asshole, and I can admit that. And so I really started looking in the mirror deeply, and I started saying, this is not the father, husband, friend I want to be anymore. I want to be somebody better, and I want to be better than I was yesterday every day. So each day I should be progressing in a way that I am not the same person I was yesterday. And I was not the last week, and I was not that. And I don't want to make those same mistakes that I've made for 30 plus years. I'd like to start making mistakes that make sense, if that makes sense. You know, I literally, like, if I'm going to make a mistake, it should be a more healthy, more of a learning experience versus a detrimental aspect in my life where I could be facing consequences. So I really started looking in the mirror, and I just started saying, you know, using all the stuff I learned in counseling, all the stuff I learned in therapy, and really focusing on looking at who I am, what makes me tick, what makes Dean do the things Dean does on a daily basis, what makes me say the things I do to people when we're in conversation, what makes me act in certain ways that may be offensive to some people, and why is it okay for me to do those things, or why is it not okay? And I really started getting really deep into myself and figuring out how I worked, what wound me up, what made me tick. And then it really boiled down to, like, I started seeing the things that I feared. I started seeing the things that I wasn't comfortable with. I started basically getting more empathetic and sympathetic and compassionate toward other people, because at the end of the day, a lot of it was selfishness. And so I did really start looking at stuff differently. Then I started working on, like, even like just the language. Like, I used to cuss like a sailor way more than I do now. And I was like, you know, that's really not appealing. You know, let me try to start changing some of the things that come out of my mouth. And so I started really working mentally on changing, like, you know, instead of using the F word, there's an actual intelligent word that I could place there. Common sense, you know, and I'm not a stupid guy. So I was like, there's got to be a good word I could put besides the F word in every other sentence. And so I started working on things like that. And then, you know, it's progressed. And so now where I'm at is it started about 3 years ago. I started in more fitness. So I've been working on the mind, and then now I'm doing more fitness. So I'm kind of getting the balance out. Because I really do feel that the physical, the mental, and the spiritual is key in our lives. If you balance those things out, a lot of things in our lives get better. And we don't even realize how much better it gets. It just does if we make these things happen.
Yeah, that's why I think mental health to me is so important, and I definitely want to encourage people to just look into themselves, help themselves, because I feel so many issues in our society would just be not saying like eradicated completely, but just be things would be a little bit better, I think, if just people got mental health help.
Yeah.
Because hurt people.
Yep.
So
It's an endless cycle.
Yeah, and if you don't deal with the root issues that you have, you're gonna, hurt other people. Just so many other things stem just from that. So if people are just in a healthier space, then it would just benefit not just yourself, it would benefit your family, anyone you work with. It would just be kind of like a domino effect. And people shouldn't, you shouldn't feel ashamed for, having to go get help. It's a good thing. And for guys, I'm gonna say it's an attractive thing. Like, for me, if there's a guy who actually is open enough to and vulnerable and says, like, yeah, I'm working on myself, I'm doing these things, like, that's wow, that's really nice. And whereas a guy who's like, yeah, I'm like, nothing's wrong, I'm like, I don't need to work on anything, that's very unattractive. So
well, and because in our society, I had another friend on here, Dylan Ogline, who is just an amazing guy. And we talked a little bit about it too. And he hosts a podcast show as well about men and men opening up. It's a Man Up show. And basically at the end of the day, you're right. And society has put a stigma on not just females, but men, that us men have to be masculine, and we have to run the family, and we have to make money, and we got to do all these masculine things. We're not allowed to cry. We got to be tough. I boxed professionally for years. I take my son to jujitsu every night faithfully. There's things that, I've always fought. I was a street fighter. I was a mean, like I said earlier, I was kind of an asshole growing up. I was not a nice guy. Because society and my father and just people around me told me I was supposed to be a man. And I never realized, like, it's okay to be a man, And it's, but also embrace your emotions. And it's okay to be a man and actually open up about things men aren't supposed to open up about. And the same stigma is put on women in our society, that there's certain things they have to be a lady, they have to do this, they have to do that. And it's not, it's a facade. It's not, you know, what it does is it oppresses and puts down the emotions that we really feel as human beings on both gender levels. What I learned a lot through therapy is that it is okay to open up. It is okay to cry. It is okay to express your feelings in healthy ways. It's not okay for me to get mad and go punch the neighbor in the face. It's okay for me to get upset with maybe a conversation we had and actually discuss it as an adult, whether I need to walk away or come back to it. You know, and these are things that, you know, it took time to learn, because I was the guy that would go over and snatch the neighbor out of his house. And, you know, I was just that guy. And so we learn a lot in that are, you know, we're told not as men, hey, you got to be masculine, you got to be tough, you got, you know, nothing's ever wrong, you're the strong guy. And at the end of the day, I don't care who you are, you can be the toughest, strongest bodybuilder, crazy guy in the world. Deep down, you have feelings and you have emotions, and you should not suppress them. And they are not invalid. They are not, you know, meant to be dismissed. They are meant to be felt. As humans, we live one life. It's a very short life. And we are meant to feel every moment of it, every emotion in it. And if we don't take time to feel them and embrace them, I think we're just doing a disservice. You know, I think that final day on this earth, we go away, we missed something. And for me, I'm at a point in life now where I don't want to miss anything. You know, I figure at 45 years old, I'm halfway or more than halfway there. And it's like, I'm not going to miss another day of life embracing who I am, embracing and loving the people around me, helping people in my community, whatever it takes to be a better human being each day, but also recognize my feelings, my emotions, and who I am.
Yeah. And being vulnerable, that's how you connect with people. Like when I see people on reality shows, or I talk to people who like, they just cannot open up, or just, they just pretend everything's perfect, that nothing's wrong. It's just like, I feel like I'm talking to a wall, like I can't connect with you. So,
and I'm one of those people too, like, you know, when we mentioned earlier about you doing stand-up and comedy and stuff like that, like comedy has been part of my life. I mean, I will go inside and watch the same funny movie I've watched since I was a kid just to laugh, versus, you know, that's just how I've always been. And when I was younger, I used sarcasm and comedy to dismiss things. I was kind of the class clown at times, you could say. And so it's just one of those things, like comedy. That's one of the other things I promote and I encourage, and I try to get a lot of guests on. Comedy is key. You know, we are meant to, part of our emotions and our stimulus and the way we express things as humans, it's comedy, it's laughter, laugh, love, you know, all these emotions. And that in comedy, there's nothing better than a good gut rolling laugh. And so I always encourage people, like, get out there, find some funny content, think of things that just make you laugh, and laugh as much as you can in life. You know, don't, it's okay to balance out crying and laughing, but at the end of the day, laugh more, find things that make you smile.
Comedy's that's something that I've, you know, I started recently doing stand-up comedy, but when I was younger, comedy was kind of my escape because my childhood was not very happy.
I think that's what it was for me as well.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, my family is not really making me smile, or I'm not having good times with them, so I would always run to like the TV and just watch, I would pretty much only watch comedy shows, whether it's a funny cartoon, stand-up, a sitcom, SNL, Mad TV, like anything that would make me laugh. And I would record them on like VHS tapes, because that way I had them, and that way if I was feeling sad, I would just pop in my VHS tape and laugh. So I feel like now people take things a little too seriously.
Yeah,
so it's good
we do in our society. Laugh. Everybody just, you know, it's the climate of the political climate alone, but our society in general, we've become more gruff, more agitated easily. And so it's like, you got to laugh things off. There was a show when I was a kid, there was a show coming out of California when I lived in Oregon, and the Dr. Demento show. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Demento.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
It was an old time show. It was where, it was one of the places where Weird Al Yankovic got his start. He was on that show a lot. But when I was little, Dr. Demento would come on about once a week. I think it was on a Friday, and he would do the show, and it was all skits. It was all like funny songs that people would send in, but they were all skits, and some were SNL skits, some were Weird Al's music, some were just random dudes around the nation. And there was stuff like, Puppy and a Chipper. There was like all these weird, crazy songs where you're like, whoa, but they were funny. And I used to record that religiously. Like every time that I still somewhere have tapes of Dr. Demento show where everybody would do their summer tapes. As kids, we would record music that we liked, and we'd have our own little cassettes. Yeah. I was recording music and Dr. Demento, and I would listen to Dr. Demento all the time just to laugh. And it was just one of those, like you said, growing up, I had such a hard childhood that it was easier for me to find ways to laugh and make myself laugh and entertain myself. And my mom worked a lot. My mom and dad were divorced, separated. We were on different sides of the United States at one point. It just crazy. But that was my coping mechanism then, was like to find a way to laugh, to find a way to smile each day. Yeah. And I still find that true today. Like I recommend, to the audience, not just to go get counseling and therapy, but I recommend take the personal time for yourself, journal. But I better than any Xanax in the planet is comedy. I tell everybody the best medicine is laughter. I mean, that really is. If you can find something that really just grabs you and makes you laugh and smile, and it's just as good as forgetting things as helping other people.
Yeah, especially like, I like in my comedy, I do mention, going to therapy, my bad childhood anxiety, and people are like, how can you make jokes about that? But it helps me to kind of find things to laugh about when it comes to that. And I've had people tell me later like that they could relate to some of the things I talked about. So it's a good way to connect with people whereas like, I mean, also like people don't want to go see a comedian who's like, yeah, my life is perfect, nothing is wrong. Like right. No, you can't relate to that.
No, there's nothing funny about a perfect person. Exactly. I'm not laughing about it. Yeah. So let me see if Anais, did I say it right? I did it. Anais, tell us where we can tell the audience where they can find you on obviously all your podcast shows, but also all your social media, anywhere where our audience can follow you, please.
Oh, wow. Okay. How much time do you have? No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
So if I made you laugh at some point, you can follow my Instagram, my comedy Instagram. It's Anais Lucia Comedy. I have a Twitter. It's Anais Lucia 7. That's my favorite number. And then I have my main Instagram. That's more just travel. Well, when we used to be able to travel. And my dog, it's called Girl and Her Shiba Dog. So that's my Instagram. And then that's the same that I use for TikTok. So Girl and Her Shiba Dog, because I have a Shiba Inu. And also if you just look in YouTube, you can see on my podcast on YouTube as well. And then if you just search my name, Anais Lucia Comedy, you can see my other videos there, comedy skits I've done, a couple stand-up clips. I'm hoping to add some more and do more skits. So
excellent.
Yeah, excellent. And then my website, anaislucia.com, it needs to be updated. So just to let you know.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. It's been great having you on here. Lately I've been, we try to do these 1-hour interviews for our first guest interviews. And then what we usually do is in the future, we invite guests to come back for a second time, because now the audience would know you. And so in the future, then you would come back and we just have you come on, same thing, more dialogue. We kind of dig deeper. We have a lot of guests that'll come on, and in the future they'll call or they'll email us and say, hey, I've got a new promotion coming up, or I've got a new show or a new this I want to promote. Can I come back on your show right away? You're more than happy to have you back on. If there's something that comes up in the near future that you just want to cross-platform or promote, you can just let us know. So we always like to do that, but we will invite you back in the future for a second time on. The first time we just want the audience to get to know you. And I think we've had a great time here today. Is there anything else you want to share?
Oh, well, I mean, I already shared my social media, I guess. Just, do things do nice things for people. You don't be afraid to get therapy. It's awesome. And I hope you guys are doing well, and don't be ashamed to take care of yourself. You deserve it. Yeah, so that's it.
I agree. Well, you have a great day, and I look forward to having you back on later.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I hope to be back soon.
Excellent.